Hello. Thanks everyone for staying here in such a late time at this conference. My name is Marina, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the regulation and DAOs, and especially focusing on Europe. So our story is we are three founders of organizations in different countries in Europe, and we are representing the blockchain industry and talking to the regulators. We're doing this for the last 5 years, but recently, so it's basically 10 months ago, there was a new regulation on crypto assets coming up in Europe. And when we saw that, we see, okay, this is not really good for decentralized use cases, this is not really good for DAOs, and we need to react. So from there, in September, we started working together. We were working with an agency that is based in Brussels, and we are talking to regulators, to the European Commission, European Parliament, and trying to convey the message of what are we doing in this community. And my talk today is not going to be about the regulation. I'm not going to bore you, but I want to tell you how our community and what we are building is conceived by the regulators. So how are they seeing what we're doing? And all the things that we built and all our stories and startups, they can be used or told in different ways. We can have this positive aspect, talking about the blockchain, how we are solving specific questions, or we can have the negative narrative, which is talking about all the negative things, hacks, and how people are laundering their money, for example. So this is what we see. We see a very cool community coming together on conferences, building stuff. We see the emerging of DAOs and DeFi, and we see a really powerful tool, which is the blockchain, that can help us build new organizations, and especially DAOs. And this is what the regulator sees. So they are usually, they don't have time, or they don't have many people that are knowledgeable about blockchain, and what they see is what they read in the news, in the media. And especially in the last year, this discussion around the energy consumption has been really, really strong, and has a really strong political narrative when they are looking into how to regulate blockchain and crypto assets. And the other part, of course, is they are very concerned about the potential money laundering and all the negative things that are happening in and on the blockchain. So at this moment, there has been increased activities by governments all around the world into regulating blockchain, but especially crypto assets. And as I said, they don't understand what decentralization means, or what, for example, proof of stake, what is the difference between proof of stake or proof of work. And this is what we have been doing in the last 10 months, trying to educate, trying to give the information in order for them to write a better regulation for us, not just for the centralized entities that are in this space. At the same time, what we saw in the last 10 months is that there's a lot of organizations that are organized, that are centralized, and they are lobbying very hard in order to, for the regulators to understand their point of view and maybe write the regulation in a way that would benefit them. So there's a lot of FUD by the incumbents. So those are the people that are looking at us, looking at our websites and at our positive and negative, mostly negative news. They usually are not very knowledgeable in tech, and this is why they need a lot of explanation of everything that we're doing, and especially around the narrative. So what regulators and laws has been doing in the last 2,000 years is regulate centralized activities and centralized entities. So all the laws are giving centralized entities rights and obligations so they can be compliant. And it's very weird to them, and it's really hard to understand how can Ethereum and other decentralized blockchains be decentralized in a way that nobody is responsible for being compliant. And for example, my friend Simon, he's working with ADAN, which is the French organization. the regulators, one asked, can we sue Ethereum if something goes wrong on Uniswap? So it's really hard for anyone that is not in the community to understand how those organizations or the tech is related. And then comes the DeFi, which is even more complicated. So the financial industry is really regulated. And of course, they saw that DeFi is now growing. But at the same time, it's really hard for them to understand. So what they are doing is copying the financial regulation and trying to write something similar for crypto assets. Usually, this regulation is not tailored to the decentralized use cases. So this is what regulators fear, and this is what they see that blockchains and decentralized use cases can actually help. So they see speculation, lack of control. They see and they hear about all the hacks. They think that these transactions are shadow banking. They are very concerned about the average Joes, so they're concerned about the consumers losing their money and their savings, which was happening. And as I said, especially in Europe and in the last year, the energy consumption was a really strong motivation for them to regulate, but also to think about blockchains. And when we have a discussion with them, again, what they think is that all the blockchains are Bitcoin, for example. And this is where a discussion and education needs to happen. At the same time, this is what we see when we think about blockchain and DeFi. And this is our narrative. But what we want to do with our organization is actually making regulators understand that this is what most of the organizations and DAOs in the space want to do. So building a new financial system, building a new payment system, building new products, doing all the activities in order to build and sustain an ethical finance system. And of course, there's different values like transparency and privacy. When we are talking, on the other hand, when we're talking to blockchains and when we're talking to different projects, they say blockchain is unstoppable. So I don't care about regulation. But at the same time, blockchain could be unstoppable, but it's not invincible. So in certain ways, in the future, the regulator could prosecute developers, deployers, users, token holders. They could be also prohibition to use institutions and normal consumers, which are the average consumers that are not knowledgeable in crypto. And this would really limit the use case of the products that we're building. They could also put controls on the gates, which are usually centralized exchanges or exchanges in general. And they could also take down domains or websites. And what is the most important thing? They could deny the Nobel Prize for Economics to Vitalik. I have two illustrations that are I think, very strong. The first one is that in the last few months, the wallets are not just wallets, but they are unhosted or hosted wallets, which is a very important way how regulators see the wallets. So they say this wallet might not be safe, might not be transparent because it's unhosted. And in the future, we'll definitely see different regulators thinking about maybe regulating this unhosted wallets or controlling those wallets, which is also already happening in a way in Germany. The second very, very important illustration is at this moment, if we take a look at this regulation, which is called Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation or the MiCA regulation, this current draft prohibits decentralized stablecoins in Europe. So there's no place for decentralized stablecoins in Europe at this moment or in this current draft. And that's the Title 4 of the current draft. And that's not all. So, as I said, there are different regulators looking into that, and this is what's coming. So in Europe, this is the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, which is defining the licenses to use and to issue and trade crypto assets, in particular stablecoins. There is anti-money laundering regulation coming, a directive. There is tax and fraud evasion coming up. And of course, on the national levels, there are different laws that are currently discussed and drafted. In the US, we see a different approach, which is more like an agency-based approach, but is still very, I would say, strong. In the last 2 days, I've been talking to a lot of projects and protocols, and they all say that they're in discussion with the US regulator. Of course, when we're talking about DAOs, there's a positive news of the Wyoming law, but this is not all. So this is just like the regulation around entities. It's not a regulation around crypto assets. And then we have other, I would say, mostly negative news coming from Asia. And there is also an international organization that has a very strong voice when it comes to regulation, and all the local regulators are very much listening to this organization. So what is the solution? We think that there is a possibility of building a regulation that is kind of a middle ground. So we don't want to have zero regulation or no regulation, because we need also this like legal clarity. But at the same time, we think that there would need to be a regulation that embraces open blockchains, that also recognize DAOs as legal persons, and that creates obligations that are adapted to DeFi and decentralization. So this is very, very important, because when this regulation in Europe was drafted, this was a year ago, more than a year ago. So DeFi was not that strong, was not on their radar at that time. And when you see this regulation, how it is applicable to DeFi, it's basically banning, in a way, as I said, stablecoins, and making almost impossible to use DeFi and to market DeFi in Europe. So what can we do as a community? I think that from our organization, me and my colleagues think that the narrative is very, very important. So I think that we as a community need to find a way how to communicate the positive things that we are doing and building in this community, and that education is very important. At the same time, drafting proposals and being directly in contact with the regulator is also very important. This is what we have been doing in the last 10 months. And of course, meeting them, talking to them, having calls, and etc. At the same time, I think this is also something that is already happening in the space, is self-regulation. We can think about the ways how to self-regulate, because we know the tech, we know what are the risks, and I think that we are really well equipped in order to think about how to self-regulate, and of course create acceptable compromises for the whole crypto space. We have come to a conclusion, and we have a proposal for an organization that would be, in a way, a lobbying organization for the decentralized use cases in Europe. That would be a neutral voice representing the decentralized blockchains and the projects built on top of them. And what we have learned in the last years, and especially in the last year talking to the European regulators, is that they are willing to talk to us, they are willing to understand this topic, but we really need to be timely. So what happens in practice is that they schedule a meeting in 3 days. And in 3 days, all the ministries or other people that are involved in this process, they need to respond to certain questions or have certain opinions. So if we are there to support them, to answer the questions they have, I think this is very, very valuable. What is really important about this regulation is that it's a regulation, is not a directive, which means that when it will come into force, it will be applicable to all the member states. And it will be applicable to everyone that is working already in Europe, but also to other entities that are coming and want to address the European customers. So in one sentence, we want to stop the FUD that is happening at the moment, and we want to be very clear about this positive narrative and about the positive stories that the people in the community are building. So this is our contact, and if you have any questions, I'll be around at the conference, or maybe now. Yeah.
I was wondering what non-lawyer lay people can do to support this initiative, so that when you guys are interfacing with regulators and these different bodies, they have like clear information to present.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Like at the moment, I think that the best is to have a dialogue. So if you have any experience, if you've done this before with any of the regulators from your country, or if you see that there are any problems, you think about any solutions, contact us and talk to us. And we are also fundraising for this project. So that's the two ways how you can interact. Thank you.